Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3. Freddy's just around the corner.
What's going on, you wild dreamers? Your two favorite horror fanatics are back for another 31 Days of Horror video review. And tonight we're going to talk about
Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Dream Warriors.
We're the Dream Warriors. Welcome to prime time, bitch.
And this is a movie that returned really some greatness to the franchise. The second one was a laughable, forgettable movie for the most part, but fun, very homoerotic, but it kind of steered away from Freddy, what made him scary in the first place. The old Fred Krueger right there, Robert Englund himself. But in part 3, we had Wes Craven returning with Frank Darabont writing the script alongside, I think it was Bruce Wagner. But we had Frank Darabont and Wes Craven returning to really make this movie scary and really set up the rest of the franchise. And this is definitely one of the best entries in the franchise, next to the first movie, in my opinion.
I agree. This is a very strong installment of the Nightmare series, probably my second favorite of the whole series. And there's a lot of these movies. But part 3 takes place at the Westin Hills Psychiatric Hospital.
Who?
There's a little inside joke there, but y'all won't get it, but that's okay. So this takes place at the psychiatric hospital with all these kids that are having these nightmares all the time. They're having psychiatric problems. And old Heather Langenkamp is back, this time working at the psychiatric hospital, and she's going to help these kids along because she has some experiences dealing with night terrors, doesn't she?
Oh, she does. You can say that for sure. And it's great seeing Heather Langenkamp back returning in the franchise in part 3, playing this therapist, going into the psychiatric institute, working with these kids that are coming across what her and her friends came across 6 years prior, and her losing most of her friends because of Freddy Krueger and her surviving barely from Uncle Freddy. So she returns helping these kids and finding out they all have these different unique things about them. And then one is Kristen, a very young Patricia Arquette, is pretty much the main character in this film of the young teenagers, and it sets up the rest of the kids that are all pretty good too. I distinctly remember watching this movie in 1988. We rented it. My dad rented it, and this is the first horror movie I ever watched. I always remember that, the beginning part of her walking with the kid, the baby. So this movie always has a special place in my heart. And rewatching this today, I just got all those feelings of watching it for the very first time. It really got me hooked on horror movies. So I love Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, and it's really great seeing all these young characters, and probably one of the most iconic kill scenes as well, and a few particular scenes having to do with the TV, and then you see like a snake like Freddy with Patricia Arquette's character, and then the thing behind you too with the needles. And there's so many in this, a lot of great practical effects.
There really are. Yeah, this has a lot of great kills, some great practical effects. The whole scene with the guy that's laying in the bed and his tendons get ripped out.
Yeah.
And he's used like a marionette. He's walked down the hallway,
Yeah.
goes out to a window and ends up plummeting to his death. We get a lot of great kill scenes. And we also see a young Larry Fishburne. He's going by Larry Fishburne in the credits for this movie as like an orderly there. He hands out the pills. Not too much to work with there, but it was cool seeing him. This is around the same time as Boys in the Hood. It's a younger Larry Fishburne with hair and everything. So it's cool to see him. And like you mentioned, Patricia Arquette, she's went on to win a lot of awards for her acting. So we see her in this, take up the main character, and she does a really good job. She's dealing with all these nightmares, going in and seeing this man in the sweater and the brown hat with the razor blade knives. So Aunt Nancy comes along, and she's able to talk to all these kids that are having these crazy nightmares, seeing all this chaos happen. So Nancy, of course, dealing with Freddy in the first film and knowing all about him and everything, she knows how to deal with them. And with this Dream Warriors, it sets up a cool scenario with each one of them having their own hidden talents and they're going to try to, use their talents within the dream world to take down Freddy once and for all. We also see Nancy's dad, played by John Saxon, the sheriff. In the first one, he has a little part in this too towards the end. The overall goal for A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, what they have to do is they have to find Freddy's, basically his bones that were buried. They happen to be in this junkyard, so they dig up the bones. There's a funny scene where the bones come alive. It's a skeleton of Freddy.
Yeah.
And it shows him fighting. It looks really bad, of course, with the effects from 1987. But basically they had to get his remains and bury him, and use holy water and basically bury the bones, and hopefully to get rid of Freddy once and for all.
Yeah, I know what's really cool about this film is they get more of a backstory of Freddy Krueger as well. He's the bastard son of 100 maniacs, and his mom was a nurse, and it really adds to the mythos and mythology of Freddy Krueger, finding out more about how he became the character that we know, from child murderer to being resurrected to the evil entity that we know in the film. So I thought it was cool how they dive into that more, and thank Wes Craven and Frank Darabont for adding that much backstory and adding more horrific elements to Freddy Krueger, and and especially in this film.
This film also adds some more comedic one-liners from old Robert Englund himself, Freddy Krueger. This is when he started to get more funny. He had his more funny one-liners than he did in the first couple of films. So this is the introduction to that. As the series goes on, he gets more and more ridiculous. Has all these ridiculous jokes, and he plays more of the comedic side. But we're starting to see that. Like we mentioned before, a lot of iconic kills. The TV scene's one that sticks out for me. I always remember that, with the girl getting sucked up in the TV. Freddy's head pops out the top, like where the antennas are. And he basically pulls up the girl, and her head goes right through the screen. And when she's found, her head's she's just hanging up there with her head through the screen of the TV.
Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite kill scenes in the entire franchise. And then I think that girl that he kills, she's like an aspiring actress, and she was like really boring in the movie.
Yes.
Didn't really care that she got killed, but she's supposed to be an actress, but there's like nothing to her.
Right.
Like interesting.
Yeah, there was a little group scene, and they're asking each one like what they wanted to tell them a little bit about each one another and find out what their talents are, what they want to do. And she's like, "Yeah, I'm going to be an actress. I'm gonna move to Hollywood and be a big star." And everybody else in the group was laughing, like, "Yeah, right."
Yeah.
And when she gets killed in the TV, Freddy says, "Welcome to primetime, bitch." Pulls her in. So, very memorable kill scene. There's some great ones. Another one that sticks out for me is when the kid that can't walk, he's been paralyzed, he can't walk, but in his dreams he's a wizard, and he gets this cloak with he's got his collar popped, and he shoots his green lasers at Freddy, hoping to put a spell on him. And Freddy's like, "Yeah, I'm not into," what does he say? He's like, "Yeah, I'm not into fantasy, in the fantasy world," or something like that. He has some funny one-liner there, but obviously it doesn't work on Freddy. And another girl is a punk rocker. She has this huge mohawk, and with some switchblades that she carries. And she's a former drug addict. So that's when Freddy, his gloves had the needles, and he injects her. It shows her arms. She has track marks on her arms, and the little track marks each have like little mouths on them. They're moving. So it's a pretty cool kill scene.
Yeah, and this is definitely a very interesting take on Freddy Krueger, and introducing some really great up and coming actors, as you're talking about. And definitely one of my favorite entries in the franchise. I love how Kristen has this like ESP kind of power to link up all the fellow dreamers in this to really take out Freddy Krueger. Right. So very original. I like how they did something different with this and kind of forgot about part two, and made this movie kind of scary again with some really great memorable kill scenes. Great soundtrack with Dokken, the band. It's a very 80s movie. The first horror flick I ever saw. Holds a special place in my heart. But I love this. I love Robert Englund. This is see more of his comedic chops and his famous one-liners. And this is like really him becoming a big part of pop culture back in the 80s. Merchandise, video games, you name it. He was a big part of that. And with him showing his comedic chops, this is how he became a big part of pop culture back then, and still is.
Propelled him to superstardom, really. He was all in pop culture. Like you mentioned, he'd show up in other movies and shows as well in popular culture. He did a lot of commercials. So part 3 really cemented his status as one of the top horror icons, and people love Freddy Krueger, and he'll always be one of the top horror icons. And Robert Englund knocks it out of the park in this one. This one was a lot of fun for me too. Nightmare on Elm Street 3 really brought the franchise back after the lackluster second one. The first one's great, of course. We see a young Johnny Depp, and then this one we see a young Patricia Arquette. So these movies always had the young up and coming actors that would eventually go into superstardom. There's several other in the franchise that introduce well-known actors too. A couple of things to mention that were interesting. You remember in the first film, after Nancy's dealt with all the trauma from Freddy, she gets that gray streak in her hair. Yeah. In this film, it is seen on the right side of her head. And in the first one, it's actually on the left. So they kind of made a goof there. The gray streak in her hair was on the wrong side for this film. And another little interesting fact about this is that the Freddy glove was actually stolen from the set of this film. And I think you might have a little clue where it ended up. Another horror film around the same time, directed by Sam Raimi. It was in a shed.
Yep, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
good old Evil Dead.
Yep. So apparently, Wes Craven and Sam Raimi had this banter going back and forth through their films. You can see The Hills Have Eyes, The Evil Dead, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Evil Dead 2. They all, they were all mingling, and you'd see different little nods to each other in these films. So yes, Freddy's glove ended up in the work shed, and you'll notice that in the shed in Evil Dead 2 from 1987.
Yep. I do remember seeing that. I remember the first time I watched that movie, I'm like, it's fucking Freddy's glove right there.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. So many memorable films, and this being one of my favorite films in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. First horror movie I ever watched as a kid, and what got me hooked on them. And now I'm this huge horror fanatic, and I just love watching these films, and it's very nostalgic for me. They never get old, and it's definitely a movie you have to watch during the Halloween season. So that being said, I'm giving A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 Dream Warriors a 4.5 out of 5 Robert Englund hair pieces.
Ooh. Also worth mentioning, there are 2 Dawkins songs throughout the film, Into the Fire and Dream Warriors, and they each have some pretty cool music videos. The Dream Warriors actually has Freddy and the cast in it, and you'll see some clips from the movie. So it's worth checking out. Those are pretty funny. Nice hair metal back in the day injected in this, and it made for some good music videos and some good music throughout the movies. I had a great time watching this. I just rewatched this morning just to get ready for this video. I had a great time with it. It's fun. It's very fun. Very great concept. I like the screenplay they had here. It was a nice little return to form for the franchise, and would kind of get things rolling for the next how many ever Nightmare on Elm Street films there were. There's a lot of them. And I'm sure we will see another Nightmare on Elm Street pop up here. I know it was already rebooted once. It didn't really work out with Jackie Earle Haley playing Robert Englund's role as Freddy Krueger. And there'll always be talk of another Nightmare on Elm Street, and I'm sure we'll eventually see that. But these are the classics. This is what kicked it all off. Freddy Krueger, this is one of his best performances in Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors. I am going to give this film a 4 out of 5 Freddy Krueger, welcome to primetime, bitch. Hair pieces.
That being said, me and this wild rascal over here, horror enthusiast himself, Uncle Henry, will be back here the entire month of October for 31 days of horror, talking about new and old horror flicks, even TV shows as well, and some other spooky treats along the way throughout the month. If you guys haven't already, check us out right here on our YouTube channel. Click subscribe below. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and our website, Cinephellas.com, if you want to get scared.
If you love being scared, come follow along with us. This has been another 31 days of horror review. That was Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors. These two fellows aren't going to go to sleep anytime soon. We're going to go party with Uncle Freddy, because we're the Dream Warriors. Cheers! Cheers!